All right. Well, thank you for the songs this evening. So we return to Proverbs chapter 7 now. All right. So chapter 6 ended with warnings against the evil woman. And she also, in that series of addresses, there would represent another sort of trap, as we saw those at the beginning of the chapter. And Solomon really showed how that the fight against temptation is really a battle of the mind. At least that is the place that it really begins, probably the place where it is primarily fought. And chapter 7 now is one long address, and it's a warning against the adulterous woman. And it does a couple of things as far as what is going to follow here. It sets up this contrast between um, the evil woman, the woman of folly, and Lady Wisdom, which really that has been sort of been ramping up really since from the very start of Proverbs here in Proverbs 1 to 9 in particularly. Um, Another thing that we see in this address is that it shows a number of dangers from being simple. And we're going to talk about that a little bit as we look at chapter 7. Um, Chapter 7 basically has a three-part structure to it. It's one long address. Verses 1 to 5 are sort of introductory, and they are a calling to attention, which we've seen that repeatedly. Verses 6 to 23 give us really this address, the body of this address, which is it's an example that functions as an illustration. So it's a scenario, and we've seen that somewhat already. But that's what verses 6 to 23 are, and in verses 24 to 27 function sort of like a conclusion to this address and really press home the point that is being made. So it's one that's not easy to break up, and I don't know if we'll be able to get through all 27 verses. We'll see how far we get. If not, we'll probably finish the rest of it the next time. But do want to begin looking at this. So again, verses 1 to 5 give us this opening introduction. My son, keep my words and lay up my commandments with thee. Keep my commandments and live. And my law is keep my commandments and live, and my law is the apple of thine eye. Bind them upon thy fingers, write them upon the table of thine heart. Say unto wisdom, thou art my sister, and call understanding thy kinswoman, that they may keep thee from the strange woman, from the stranger which flattereth with her words. So, again, we get this calling to attention. We see the beginning of the address, my son. And again, the context, Solomon is instructing his young son in wisdom, in the ways of wisdom, warning against the ways of folly and the ways of sin, and in seeking to impart wisdom to him. So again, we get words like keep and lay up, and they give us the idea of guarding some valuable object. The idea of that you have been given a rare and valuable treasure, and you would keep that and guard it and store it up and watch over it. Um, we have this repetition of words, commandments. We see those being repeated as well. These are the words, the commandments of wisdom, and obviously reinforcing the fact that learning wisdom, um, one major part of it is paying heed to instruction. So just like we're going to see beginning in verse 6, he gives this scenario that is an example. Um, the point of learning wisdom is being able to learn from that scenario without having to experience it yourself, so to speak. So you don't have to go down the road of folly in order to learn the lesson to avoid that way. Oh, this is a bad way. I'm not going to go that way. Um, Gaining wisdom means being able to learn from the examples and the follies of others and be able to avoid those consequences. That is far better than learning by a bitter experience. So learning through instruction is just one of those essential marks of wisdom. Um, keeping the commandments, and live. So once again, these wisdom instructions are not just good advice. They're much more serious than that, and they have serious ramifications and ramifications beyond just this present earthly life. So it's easy to let these things slip, and that's why we see Solomon repeatedly saying, "Listen, pay attention, take heed to these words, keep them, bind them on." Your fingers and write them on the table of your heart, as he goes on to say, keeping as the apple of the eye. Keep these things in mind. Don't let them slip. And it's easy to let them slip. It's easy to let them go. Um, so the idea of binding on the fingers, um, and even keeping in the heart, or you can always think mind there. It is a word literally that refers to the heart, but references to the internal organs like that are, it's for the inner person, the inner being, what we would just think of as the mind. Um, keeping those things at hand, always having them being a fixture, is what we saw in the last chapter, being a fixture in your mind. In other words, that's one of the goals, is not just hearing these lessons, but listening to these lessons and taking these things to heart and mind, having them always ready to put to use. And that's the idea of being bound on the fingers. This next saying is one that is not immediately apparent. So, say unto wisdom, thou art my sister, and call understanding thy kinswoman. Um, so wisdom here is being personified, and that's um, essentially he warns in the next verse about keeping from the strange woman, and he's basically saying embrace wisdom once again. So wisdom is being personified as a woman, and then the evil woman is obviously personified as obviously a woman, and he's basically saying don't avoid the evil woman, avoid the woman of folly, and embrace the woman of wisdom. Now, what the actual meaning of, or the precise meaning of the metaphor that he's using is what is not entirely certain, but sister and kinswoman obviously speak of being very close. And so it could be there's a couple of options. It could be, on the one hand, that he's saying, like a very close beloved family member, keep wisdom close, stay away from the evil woman and keep wisdom close. And there is also the possibility that the reference to sister and kinswoman is not um, sister and kinswoman the way that we're thinking, but more along the line of the Song of Solomon, that refers to the Shulamite as a sister. So it's not familial in that sense, but more in terms of like marriage. And we've seen that before. We've seen that before in these addresses in the beginning of Proverbs, essentially almost like saying, here's the kind of woman that you need to avoid at all costs. and here's the kind of woman that you need to embrace. This is the kind of woman that you need to pursue. So we've seen that wouldn't be out of the realm, but it's not entirely certain the precise meaning. Now, as far as the precise meaning of the metaphor goes, it still doesn't take away from us being able to understand what Solomon is saying in a sense of prefer wisdom and keep wisdom close, like someone close and dear to you on this earth that you would. And then the alternative there in the next verse is to um, avoid the strange woman, the stranger. And strange has the idea of foreign, and probably one of the implications of that is that this is a woman not of faith. Um, it came to be used, particularly within Israel, to refer to someone that's an outsider, but not just an outsider because of their ethnicity or whatever the case, but they're an outsider to the covenant. They're an outsider to the community. They're not. They're outsiders to the worship of Yahweh. In other words, and that probably is the idea of the strange woman. In other words, she's a godless woman. She's not a God fearing woman. She's a godless woman. Sometimes in the previous chapter described as an evil woman. Sometimes described as a fornicator or an adulteress, and so on. And so here again, now we see the design. So we've had this familiar call to pay attention. And then in verses 4 and 5, he makes it very plain. Son, I want you to embrace wisdom like a sister, like a kinswoman. Again, possibly like a spouse, like a wife, and keep away from. And doing so will enable you, will keep you away from the strange woman. And once again, that flattereth with her words. So again, there's something of the contrast again at play. Um, this strange woman, he's already said of her that she's not knowable. The flattery lets us know that there's hidden motives and agendas there, and the things that she's saying and the way that she's presenting herself is very carefully cultivated for a particular response and effect. It's not, it's not her true self, so to speak. So unlike being able to know, like in Proverbs chapter 5, when he talked about the blessings of faithful marriage. All right, so that's the introductory part. And now verse 6 begins the actual scenario. For at the window of my house I looked through my casement and beheld among the simple ones, I discerned among the youths a young man void of understanding. Now, another thing that's not entirely clear, some question is verses 6 to 23, is this coming from Solomon or is this wisdom speaking? And I don't know that there's really a lot to be said one way or the other. I mean, it's inspired wisdom from God, and so it doesn't really. I don't see that it really affects the meaning of anything that is said. Trying to look at it one way or the other. So basically, at the window implies some distance. So being able to observe from a distance, being able to observe some things that are going on. And he beheld among the simple ones, the youths, a young man that was void of understanding. So, first of all, in Proverbs, as we've talked about, simple is not not really derogatory. It's not an insulting thing. Simple is a better way to think of it, I think, and I think one of the commentators I was reading, I think maybe put it something like this. I don't remember which one off the top of my head, but it's like a stage of life. So it's like a stage of development. We all start out as babies, and we go through stages of development. I mean, we start out, we can't eat solid food and what have you, and so we have to grow and develop, and we can't walk and we can't talk, and so we go through these stage, and then you become, what is called a toddler, and you're toddling around and falling a lot and that sort of thing. Don't have great balance, but you're at least mobile, and so on. Well, being simple is just like that. We all start there. We all start out simple, so it's not necessarily inherently bad thing to be simple, but essentially it's being a um, like maybe being a novice, someone that's just inexperienced and just hasn't acquired the knowledge that someone who has lived a lot longer, gone through a lot of experiences, especially somebody that if they have wisdom. So among the simple ones and among the youths, which there is a connection there. I mean, that's particularly a condition of youth, and especially you could talk about maybe getting up like to teen years, sort of that getting close to that adulthood kind of time. um, Generally, if you're talking about really young children, they're simple, in a sense. They don't have a lot of knowledge and experience, and they don't really think that they do. Then you start getting those teen years, and you've gained a little bit. You've gained just a little bit, and when we're young like that, we tend to want to make a lot out of that. We've gained a little bit. We've had a little bit of experience. We gained a little bit of knowledge, and we really think that we know. And one of the other dangers that would be for use today, and we've talked about how growing up today, with technology and everything that we have, it is very different. And I think this is an area where the tendency to think that we know more, that we've experienced more, that we're better equipped at life than others is a particular danger for young people today. So the the youth that he observed was among the simple ones, among other youths, and he says that also he is a young man that is void of understanding. Now, the interesting thing here is that this word is exactly the same word that's translated heart, back up here in verse number 3. It's the exact same word. This is a young man without a heart. But again, remember that's sort of figurative language. Just like if we speak of someone that's really courageous, and we say, "Boy, they've got a lot of guts." Well, that doesn't mean that they have more intestines than the normal person. Obviously, it means that they're courageous. Same thing. It's mind. So this is a young man without a mind, and we could say, don't have a brain in his head, if we want to just get real plain about it. That's what the assessment is of this young man. He's among the simple ones, the other youths, and don't have a brain in his head. That is what we're set up for here in this scenario. Now, we come to understand why, as the observation continues, passing through the street near her corner, and he went the way to her house in the twilight, in the evening, in the black and dark night. Now, this is this is where we want to be careful about being simple and being without a brain. Um, that doesn't mean that he doesn't know what he's doing, because it's plain he does know what he's doing. He has gone through the street. He's gone near to her corner. He went the way to her house, and not only did he go that way, but he did it in the twilight, the evening, in the black and dark night. In other words, he did it under cover, having some veil of secrecy to be able to go this way. So again, the reason that he's simple is, again, because he's young and he doesn't have the knowledge and the experience, but he's void of understanding, because he doesn't really understand fully the consequences of what he's playing at here. He just doesn't really understand those consequences. Because if he did, he would not go that way. So what is he doing, this young man? Well, thinking that he is covered, he is sort of casually putting himself in place to be able to have an encounter. He's putting himself in this place to where he can go, oh, hell, imagine running into you here. He's putting himself there to be able to have this sort of an encounter. And one thing that we might even say is that he's flirting with danger. He's flirting with danger. He's putting himself in the position, in the place, to be able to have this encounter. And you notice, talks about her house. There's no question about who that is, as he just mentioned the strange woman in the earlier part of the introduction. So verse 10, and behold, there met him a woman with the attire of a harlot and subtle of heart. So he put himself in the place to be able to have this encounter. And, you get the idea of this behold that's sort of punctuating, well, and wouldn't you know it, he meets her there in the street. Now, she is described to us as having the attire of a harlot. And of course, harlot essentially just means what we would refer to as a prostitute today. It doesn't say that she is one, but that she appears. She's made herself appear. That's what she looks like. Now, obviously, what is the attire of a harlot? Well, that's not given us. I mean, we're not given a description of the clothing that she was wearing and of her appearance. And you might be surprised that the Bible doesn't give us a dress code. Now, if you're familiar with sometimes Christian schools and other private schools and things, they have strict dress codes, and you'll see measurements from the knee and from the collarbone and from the this and the that and the hair, ears and all this kind of, you'll see this kind of nowhere in the Bible, not even in all the 613 commandments, are there any such specifics about clothing. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't matter that we're not, to be clothed and to be clothed properly and appropriately. But one of the aspects of our dress and our appearance, that's kind of difficult to quantify, but there is a cultural aspect to it. In other words, what may appear as the attire of a harlot, 3,000 years ago, in the Middle East, probably doesn't look the same as what it does today in somewhere else, in America or wherever else. So there is some cultural aspect to that. And so we're not given a description with measurements of hem lengths and all these. We're not given that sort of thing. But the point is again always relevant, because no matter what sort of the cultural norms and practices and things may be, there is a way of presenting ourselves through our dress and our actions and what have you, in these kind of ways. It is very possible. So obviously um, this would be a part of what this woman is doing, and a part of her um, sort of her practiced art, her words. There's a lot of emphasis on her words, but notice also it says that she's subtle of heart or mind, and again, it's the same word there. In other words, she's crafty. So there's a contrast here between the young man who's simple and doesn't hardly have a brain in his head, and this woman who is very shrewd. She's very clever and capable in what it is that she wants to accomplish and what effect that she wants to bring about. And so from her clothing and from her appearance and from her actions and from her speech, all of these things are all a part of this package that she has put together. Now he goes on describing her. She is loud and stubborn. Her feet abide not in her house. Now she is without, now in the streets, and lieth in wait at every corner. Now, the loud and stubborn and everything that's described over here, um, she lies in wait at every corner. We could probably sum those things up and say she's very persistent. She's very persistent at what it is that she's doing. And she is clamoring for attention in whatever ways that are going to seem best suited. So again, when you think about that contrast with wisdom and Lady Wisdom, um, she is also one that went about in public places and in the streets and in the high places or whatever, and raised her voice, giving out a call. So one of the objects or objectives of this wisdom instruction is to know that on the one hand, yes, wisdom is accessible. Wisdom is calling out. But you have to make that effort. Why? Because you have other voices that are calling out. And in this particular case, with the this strange woman, she's hard to ignore. She's hard to ignore. She is in all these different places. She's in the streets. She's lying in wait, and that's again back to the metaphor of like a hunter that has set a trap, or maybe they've set up an ambush point on some sort of game, and they're waiting to catch them, and that is how that she's being described. So on the one hand, the effort is required to listen and to hear and to retain instruction, to be able to look at examples and scenarios like this and be able to learn from them, rather than having to get burnt yourself. Sometimes kids will do that. One kid maybe will touch something and oh, that's hot, and so then another one comes up and touches it to see. And that's just the sort of things that we do when we are rather simple. So gaining with the objective again of wisdom is understanding what is going on. And I would say that There's also a couple of good warnings here on both parts for the young man and we're not finished with this scenario. I don't know how much we'll get through of it, but there's a couple of good warnings here for the young man in this scenario, and even for this woman in this scenario. And one of those warnings that would apply to both is that God knows what they're doing. This young man went the way of her house. He went into that street, and he did so under the cover of night. And he did so that he could have this encounter. But he's not fooling anyone, certainly not God that sees and knows. And so he's rationalized this in his mind that, oh well, he just accidentally ended up there, or he just happened to be in this place at this time, when really he tried to make that happen. And whatever his intentions were, we know at the very least that he was flirting with danger. He was looking for some sort of a thrill that was going to come from having this encounter. Again, however far he thought that might go, and whatever his intentions might have been. And then on the other hand, with the woman in this case, the strange woman, well, she's also playing at a game. Neither one of them are being honest in this whole scenario. She's also playing at a game, and she's very good at it and very practiced at it, and so she's going to be hard to ignore, hard to not see. Which again would come back to the warning from the previous chapter: don't even go that way. All right, so we continue with this scenario there in verse 13. So she caught him and kissed him, and with an impudent face said unto him, I have peace offerings with me. This day have I paid my vows. Therefore came I forth to meet thee diligently, to seek thy face, and I have found thee. So then she begins to talk. It says that she caught him and kissed him at once, and of course, making her words to have even that much more effect. Having peace offerings and paying of vows is again, it's another one of those references that's kind of obscure, and not a lot of agreement on what exactly is meant. I think, in my estimation, the most likely scenario or reason why she'd be saying this is because that's a time of celebration, and having peace offerings. Well, peace offerings, as we just recently talked about, those involve a meal. Those involve a feast, as it were, a communion meal. And so, she's ready for a party. Essentially, she's ready for a celebration. She's paid the vows, meaning so she's returned with the part of the peace offerings that she would keep and eat. So, in other words, she's got everything they need. Got this great meal ready to go. It's a festive occasion. Hey, there's reason to celebrate. It seems the most likely home or press on him. Therefore came I forth to meet thee diligently, to seek thy face, and I found thee. Now, what she does is, she starts out with the peace offerings and the vows. It's a festive occasion. Hey, let's celebrate. And then she pushes this urgency. I came diligently. I was looking for you. And in other words, sort of from the way that she's playing this game, she's not wanting him to have time to think about it and to mull things over. she starts out, she grabs him, she kisses him, she starts, saying these things just one right after the other. And it's like he's, just sort of getting struck with all of these in a row. And so pressing him urgently, this is great. You need to yield. You need to come along. I've decked my bed with coverings of tapestry, with carved works, with fine linen of Egypt. I've perfumed my bed with myrrh, aloes, and cinnamon. Come, let us take our fill of love unto the morning. Let us solace ourselves with love. So again, she's ready. Not only does she have the supplies that they would need, they can have a great meal. They can celebrate. But she's also got the place, and the place is ready. And so this description of this bed with tapestry and carved and fine linen and all these perfumes and everything, it all speaks of just a luxurious of space and experience to have. Verse 19, for the good man is not at home. He has gone a long journey. He's taken a bag of money with him and will come home at the day appointed. Now, it's interesting here. This phrase that she uses is not exactly saying her husband. Now, most likely that is the intention, but not exactly saying her husband. And it's very similar, as I understand it, to a phrase that Potiphar's wife used in connection with her efforts and attempts with Joseph. Not really referring to Potiphar as her husband, but more like the man of the house. Sort of almost, it might be subtle, but it's just like it's this little psychological thing that sort of puts some distance here. She's not talking to him about her husband. But, the man of the house is gone. In other words, we've got the place to ourselves. He's on a long journey. He's got business to conduct. He's not coming back anytime soon. So we've got time. We've got opportunity. We've got motive. I mean, we've got everything that we could need. And then we see, beginning with verse 21, with her much fair speech, she caused him to yield, and with the flattering of her lips, she forced him. So there we see the result. And again, we have no idea with this young man were his intentions to actually go this far, to actually end up where he ends up. I don't know. Maybe not. But at the very least, we know that he was flirting with it. And maybe his intentions were to get himself into this situation and maybe just see what happens, just see where it goes, all that sort of thing. And so notice that the fair speech and the flattering of her lips, all the things that she was saying all the right things. She's sort of hitting him one right after another. And again, this is a young man without a brain in his head. So he's already sort of handicapped in the thinking department. Not really giving him time to think, and it's sort of urgently, and an idea of, you need to do this now while everything is ready, everything is perfect here. And so then Solomon gives starts really into this conclusion almost. This is sort of an assessment. He goeth after her straightway, as an ox goeth to the slaughter, or as a fool to the correction of the stocks, till a dart strike through his liver, as a bird hasteth to the snare, and knoweth not that it is for his life. In other words, he uses a couple of different images here. The ox going to the slaughter, the fool going to the stocks, a bird going for the bait in the snare, not knowing that it's for his life. And that really is what's common. It's what's common to all of those. Doesn't realize what is happening, doesn't realize what the full consequences of these actions are going to be. and doesn't realize how much that his very life and soul are in danger in playing this kind of game. And then we get to the conclusion that sort of presses the point home. Hearken unto me now, therefore, O ye children, and attend to the words of my mouth. Let not thine heart decline to her ways, go not astray in her paths, for she hath cast down many wounded, yea, many strong men have been slain by her. Her house is the way to hell, going down to the chambers of death. So Solomon doesn't really mince any words here at this point. He calls for the attention. Listen, listen, O ye children. Word for sons, but could be sons and daughters in that sense, children plural. But again, in the context addressing the young men. And attend, hearken, attend. And so don't let your mind incline to her ways. That's exactly what the young man did. You know, he sets out under the cover of darkness. He thinks he's got secrecy, and he puts himself in a position so that he can have this encounter. And then, you know, when she shows up, obviously, you know, she's way more than he can handle, and he finds himself being led away like this animal to the slaughter. Don't go astray in her paths. And of course, the path, the road, the way is just is a controlling theme and metaphor throughout Proverbs. The way of life, and don't go astray. And astray because this is not the path of wisdom. You're going astray from the path of wisdom to go this way. No matter how excited it may make you feel, whatever, it is not the path of wisdom and righteousness and life. And he goes on describing sort of the carnage that she's left in her wake. She's cast down many wounded, many have been slain by her. And that's we have examples of that in the Bible as well as throughout history, and probably all of us know and have seen examples of that in our lives as well. Her house is the way to hell. That would be Sheol there, or the grave, going down to the chambers of death. And once again, we come back to the idea of being wounded and slain, and going down to the grave, and down to the chambers of death, is the idea of you might survive this. You might. You go this path, you might survive it, but you certainly will not do so unscathed, unharmed, and most likely you are embracing ruin rather than wisdom and life. All right, so we did manage to get through there. Again, just a reminder, being simple doesn't mean that you don't know what you're doing. And one of the temptations when you are simple is that sort of rationalization. You can almost convince yourself that this is just accidental. You know, this is just happening, when really all along you're making choices, you're taking steps, you're making decisions to put yourself in the position for this accident to happen. So it doesn't mean that you don't know what you're doing, and it certainly doesn't mean that God doesn't know what you're doing. And it's a condition that that all go through. It's a condition, again, particularly associated with youth. And it's not wrong or bad to be simple. It's just, I mean, it'd be like saying it's wrong or bad for, a newborn can't have solid food. I mean, it's not that. But we also have to understand that being simple is not fixed just by the mere passing of time. So being simple is typically associated with youth in Proverbs, for instance, but that doesn't mean that it gets fixed just by getting older. It takes active effort for wisdom. And again, think about those repeated calls to listen, to keep, to guard, to understand, to follow in this way. All right, I'll stop there. Any questions on anything we're looking at here this evening? All right, well, if not, I'll pray and we'll be dismissed. Almighty Father in heaven, Lord, thank you for the day that you've given us, and thank you for your word. And we thank you for these lessons, these instructions. And Father, how I pray that each one of us here would take your words to heart. Father, that we would have them fixed in our minds, that we would meditate on them, that we might be just like the blessed and planted by the rivers of water and bringing forth fruit to the glory of your name. Father, I pray that you would help us to learn and to heed the instructions that are given. Help us to be able, as we look even around at the world around us, to be able to learn wise lessons from even what we see. Father, I pray that you would be with those we've been praying for and those requests we've had tonight as well. Father, I pray you be with us throughout the rest of this week. Prepare hearts and minds for service on the Lord's Day. And I pray all these things in the holy and precious name of Jesus Christ. And amen.